Welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am Anthony. I'm the host of Disguised Coverage, host of this podcast. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro_ANT. Find Disguised Coverage, this podcast streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can also find Cover One streaming there as well, and the rest of the podcast under that brand. Give Cover One a follow. Subscribe to Cover One. Follow everybody on the team. Subscribe to Disguised Coverage. Follow me on the Twitter. That's the intro for this, you guys. And we're going to jump right into a little Bills-Titans recap. Not that I want to, because it was bad. It was bad. But we're going to go into some Bills-Titans recap. We're going to look at the good, although there wasn't a lot of it. We're going to look at the bad. We're going to look at the meh, so the kind of the stuff. And then we're going to put eyes towards Kansas City and what next week means and why next week versus Kansas City is even more important than initially anticipated. And let's start with this Bills-Titans game. Let's start with a game that was less than ideal, but we're going to start with the good. And that first good, it may seem small, it may seem minuscule. The first good I want to start with is Cam Lewis. He wasn't tested tremendously in coverage. I think part of that was the function of where the Titans were attacking last night and who they attacked. But Cam Lewis stuck out to me for the way he came up in run support. Derrick Henry is a monster of a man. He is like a smaller running back version of Mount Everest, and he's hard to bring down. Josh Norman found that out. Cam Lewis is a smaller corner. He's an unproven corner at the NFL level. And the effort and the heart and the technique that he showed in coming up to stick Derrick Henry, he stuck him 3 good times. Came up, got low, chest on thigh, chest on hip, on shoulder, wrapped up, brought him down. He was a bit of a force in the running game. I also know that he had a bad issue not kind of a bad issue, but a bad play towards the end that led to Derrick Henry's second touchdown. He came, he set the edge, he stuck the tight end, he shed the block really well, but just a half second late allowed Derrick Henry to get that edge. But he's young, he's inexperienced, but I thought his tackling was really, really on point. I liked it. I liked the effort that he gave, and it was good to see what he was able to do in his first real game experience against a good football team. So that was a bit of a silver lining. Second good from this game, the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills. Not so much in the run game, which we're going to get into in the bad, but pass protection. And I know, to play devil's advocate, you can look at it and say, well, the Titans are really dropping 7 and 8 in coverage a lot of time. They were really only rushing 3 or 4, so I guess it's easier to pass protect in those situations. But the Bills' offensive line held up well. They gave Allen plenty of time. He had the ability to sit back, diagnose coverage, make reads, which he needed to because the Titans were determined to not let Allen beat them deep. They wanted to keep everything in front of them. This is a funny comment. I like this. Logged in just for the good. The bad was pretty obvious. Good comment. The offensive line was solid. I know Darrell Williams had a bit of a snafu that cost us some yardage, and I know Deion Dawkins had a really bad whiff that allowed Harold Landry to get inside and bring down Allen, and it was such bad timing that Landry got in right as Allen was going with the play fake to TJ Yeldon and had almost no time to react. Yeldon had no time to reach and get that block or even get a piece of Landry, and Landry made a really good play. But other than that, the pass protection was good, and I think it's been that way for most of the year. Part of the reason why Josh Allen has been successful to this point has been the stability and the ability of the offensive line. And they showed up again last night. I know Tennessee was missing several players on the defensive line, several players as a whole, which we heard 74 times from the broadcast as if the Tennessee Titans overcame the greatest adversity known to man because they only practiced twice in 16 days, which we also heard 74 times, and how just they are a shining beacon of hope in the darkness that is 2020. That was annoying, but I digress. I know the Titans were missing some people on the defense and on the defensive line, but the Bills' offensive line held up. Allen had the ability to sit back, take his time, make some throws, and he did. He did some things. He not great. It was it was his worst game of the year, but it was still a decent floor. But shout out to the offensive line for giving him the protection and helping him out. Another good, you guys. Small wins, small things. TJ Yeldon in short yardage. I'm not counting the long run towards the end of the game on the draw when it was pretty much garbage time. But TJ Yeldon proved effective in short yardage. I know TJ Yeldon is someone who definitely gets overlooked, especially with the success of Devin Singletary last year, and especially with the drafting of Zach Moss this year. And there was a lot of wonder, what is Yeldon's role? Where does he play? How does he fit? I know we had the drop last year against the Pats on the throw from Barkley in the first game against the Pats, but he played well last night. He had the touchdown catch on a beautifully gorgeous frozen rope of a throw from Josh Allen. Really good stuff. Yeldon brought that in, but he was good in short yardage. He executed on his second and short carries, his third and short carries. He played well. I know it's a smaller sample size and it's not the type of good or the win that we want to see coming out in this game, but it was nice to see him play well, especially with Zach Moss on the mend, and he's kind of coming back. He's returning. He's getting healthy, but he's still got an injury that takes time to mend and heal, and it's not a guarantee that he's going to come back right away and how soon it is. So it's nice to see Yeldon be able to pick up the slack and be able to offer the Bills something. Also, part of the good, I know the defensive line is not looking good in terms of sacks and stats and overall pressures, but Mario Addison and Quentin Jefferson both flashed last night, not just in the pass game, but in run support. Mario Addison and Quentin Jefferson, both free agent additions that came last year. I know there's been a lot of talk of the Bills miss Phillips and Shaq from last year, and the defensive line isn't getting it done this year, and that's fair. They're not. Their stats are not good, which we're going to get into. But Mario Addison had several plays last night where he set the edge, he shed blocks, he flashed, disrupted the run game, got some pressure. Same thing with Quentin Jefferson. Some good moves and a variety of moves. A quick swim over the guard, a quick stick and shed of a tackle or a tight end, beating the pulling guards, things like that. I thought they both were somewhat pluses and somewhat, positive players and made positive plays from last night's game. Again, not a lot of positivity to go around, but Mario Addison and Quentin Jefferson, along with Jerry Hughes, who I know had a bad game last night, but Jefferson and Addison and Hughes have really been the best front four players this year so far for the Bills. They've graded out well. I'm not really a natural or complete subscriber to grades, but they flashed, they've generated plays, they've generated some pressures. They've really been the only somewhat semblance of consistency up front. Addison and Jefferson played good, especially in the run game. The Bills did well against that run game. They didn't get a ton of pressure on Tannehill in the passing game, but what pressures there were, a lot of it was due to Addison and due to Jefferson. And that's the good, you guys. It's not a heavy list. There's not a lot of good. And we're going to go to the bad, which there is a pretty decent amount of. The bad, you guys, the bad. I guess we'll start. Good comment here from Joe Nelson. The Bills came out flat in general. A few bad plays didn't help either. And controlling the line of scrimmage is a general weak point, especially on D. That's a shout out to overall general defensive line play. But I really want to hit on here, the Bills came out flat in general. That's something I don't think you have to be an analyst to see. I don't think you have to be tremendously knowledgeable in football to see that as a bad aspect from last night. The Bills came out and, much like Sean McDermott said, beat themselves. Credit to Tennessee. They played a good game. They had a good scheme. They had good technique. They executed well on the field, but the Bills came out flat and definitely did not help themselves. You cannot beat yourself in the NFL and win football games, especially against a good team like Tennessee. And I don't fear Tennessee in the same way that I do Baltimore and Kansas City in the AFC. But Tennessee's a good football team. They made it to the AFC Championship. They had a chance to go to the Super Bowl. They had the lead on the Chiefs in Arrowhead in that AFC Championship game. They're a good football team, and they're well coached. All the annoyances with COVID aside and all the talks and how much we don't like them and the Music City Miracle and the fan ballot bot cheating thing last year, all those things aside, they are a good football team. And they came out and they executed, and the Bills did not. They came out flat. And there was a lot of bad. Let's start with the turnovers. The turnovers, which, first of all, the Bills had 3 and Tennessee had 0. So that's not good. But it was the timing of the turnovers that really got everything. They mentioned it on the broadcast, I believe, or maybe it wasn't the broadcast. You come out, Tennessee wins the coin toss. They defer. They kick. Bills get the ball first. It's the offense. It's Allen. It's this high-powered attack where Stephon Diggs is tied for the lead in receiving yards, and Josh Allen is in the MVP talks, and the Bills' offense is getting press and publicity and all these spots and all this love. Tennessee kicks off. Bills get it. Turnover right away. On a less-than-ideal throw from Allen, but still one that Robert should have caught, you turn it over right away, and then it leads to a touchdown. But the one that really killed, the turnover that killed us for everything that went wrong, it's 21-10. The Bills are driving. They're eating up clock. They're matriculating the ball down the field. Allen makes that poor read, kind of / poor throw. Butler picks it. Beasley goes for the strip, doesn't get it. Butler almost houses it. Tennessee scores again. Those turnovers were not only bad because you're turning the ball over, but they were so inopportune. Terrible. You can't have that. Especially good football teams. Especially against good football teams, when you're hurting, you've got top guys on offense and defense who are out. You can't afford to hurt yourself like that and also hurt yourself to that degree. There's a difference in turning it over versus turning it over in such a critical moment that you handicap yourself and hamstring yourself early and often at critical points in the game. If the Bills drive on that first drive and don't set the Titans up that easily, who knows where that game goes? If they score a touchdown when they're down 21-10, if they answer how they did and how they had throughout the rest of the game at different points, who knows where that game goes? But you can't discount those turnovers. You can't have turnovers like that. It was bad. Also, as part of the bad, getting field goals versus your opponent getting touchdowns. We saw it in the playoff game against the Texans. The Bills dominated that game. They got field goals. The Texans got touchdowns. The Texans won that game. We saw it in the second game against the Pats last year. Bills got field goals. Pats got touchdowns. You will lose football games, again, especially when you're playing good teams, if you get 3 when you have the opportunity to get 7. And if you let your opponent get 7 when you have the opportunity to hold them to 3, that's basic math. You will lose that battle. The Bills lost that battle last night. Heavy. That also ties into the red zone defense, which has been very poor this year. The Bills are currently 26th on the year in red zone defense. That's in terms of how often they allow touchdowns when in the red zone. They're allowing touchdowns on 71% of attempts in the red zone at this point. Tennessee last night was 6 for 6 in the red zone. And I know the defense was put in some precarious positions. It's not easy to come out and get a stop when the offense starts drives inside your red zone or inside your 15, inside your 20. It's not easy to get stops, but you got to get one. And just the law of averages and statistics, you should be able to at least pull one out at some point. Tennessee went 6 for 6. Granted, maybe the last one shouldn't have counted because Ryan Tannehill was definitely across the line of scrimmage, but at that point the game was over, so who cares? But Tennessee went 6 for 6 in the red zone. Situational football, third down conversions, red zone offense, red zone defense, plays that determine wins and losses like that. It's hard to win when you don't play good situational football. The Patriots, as much as I hate them, have played good situational football for years. They come up with those third down stops. They hold teams to 3 when the offense gets into the red zone. They don't beat themselves on things like that. They don't make it easy on their opposition. The Bills have made it pretty easy on their opposition in the red zone so far this year, and definitely last night. Again, Tennessee going 6 for 6 in the red zone. Pretty terrible, pretty bad. Another bad, the running game for the Buffalo Bills. Devin Singletary, 10 carries, 25 yards last night. 11 carries for 25 yards. The running game has been something that the Bills haven't gotten going all year. And it hasn't been terrible because the Bills' offense has been throwing it all over the field. And for as much as this is an offensive football team and a team with an offensive identity, which the Bills are now, they've been throwing it. They're a passing team. So if you're doing really good in your passing game and you're killing it in the passing game, devil's advocate, you can say, well, we don't need to run it. Why change it if it's working? If it's not broke, don't fix it. Dance with the girl that brought you. All those proverbial statements. You can pass the hell out of the football and it works. Why bother going to the running game? But when the Bills have tried to run it, it's been tough. Even with when Singletary has been successful, he's had to make guys miss in the backfield. It's due really to great plays from Devin Singletary, making a guy miss, breaking a tackle. And for as good as the offensive line has been in pass pro all year, and as for as good as they were in pass pro last night against Tennessee, they've not been very good in the running game. They've had some moments, but they've blown some gap assignments. They missed some blocks. They've let guys in the backfield early. Again, for as awesome as Devin Singletary has been, making guys miss 2-3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, he shouldn't be having to make guys miss 2-3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That's a problem. And as we move forward, if you're a one-trick pony, I don't care how good your one trick is, it's easier for teams to stop you. If the Bills are a passing offense, that's fine. I'm fine with the Bills being a passing offense, but there has to be some semblance of a running game at some point, whether it comes from Josh Allen and the QB sweeps, which I'm not a fan of. I would rather us be able to run the ball with Singletary and Moss and Yeldon and whoever else, and even Isaiah McKenzie. I would rather not have to resort to Josh Allen running the ball, whether on design runs or scrambles. But if that's how it has to come, that's how it has to come. You have to be able to keep a defense off balance at some point. And last night was an example of the Bills not being able to do that. The lack of a run game hurt them last night, especially with the type of defense the Tennessee Titans were playing. Also, on the bad last night, I know I mentioned the success, well, not success, but the positive play of Mario Addison and Quentin Jefferson. But the pass rush, not good last night. Tannehill, lots of time sitting back there, just looking, surveying, looking, and surveying. Now, some of that pass rush, or some of the pass rush not getting home, was due to Tannehill being able to get the ball out quick. When you snap it and A.J. Brown is wide open, or Jonnu Smith is open, or Khalif Raymond is open, it's easy to, snap, cool, and just chuck it to that guy. It's easier to do that. But even on the routes where the Bills had good coverage, the Bills pass rush did not get home. And that's something that's been happening all year. Good stat here. The Bills defense has on pass rush situations and attempts, they are only getting hurries on 3.8% of those plays on the year. That's last in the NFL. They're only generating a hurry on 3.8% of attempts when it comes down to the pass rush. They're not getting home. And that's something, honestly, that's really surprising. It was very evident in last night's game. It hurt the Bills defense tremendously. And I didn't expect that coming into the year. I loved what the Bills did when it comes to the defensive line in the offseason. I love the addition of Jefferson. I liked Vernon Butler. I love Mario Addison. I don't think Jerry Hughes is over the hill. I know people are trying to talk about it, and there was talk of, release him or trade him or whatever. Jerry Hughes leads the Bills with 18 pressures. He's graded out well. He's played well. He stayed strong. I know he had a bad game last night, but Jerry Hughes has done well. I loved the draft pick of A.J. Epinesa, and I know he hasn't been a standout so far this year, but I love the Bills' defensive line coming in. I think you would see that across a lot of analysts and a lot of pundits. The Bills' defensive line looked to be a strength, and we just haven't seen it on the stat sheet or even with our eyes on the field so far this year. They're just not getting home. They're not getting sacks. They're not always getting pressures and hurries. And when you've got injuries in your pass coverage and you're also not getting home on the pass rush like last night, you're going to get eaten alive. And the Bills got eaten alive in those metrics. Also, someone who got eaten alive, Taron Johnson, got beat on two really bad plays last night. The third and long where he got beat by Raymond, bad on the inside. That was also a good route by Raymond. He also got beat another time by A.J. Brown that A.J. Brown kind of pushed off, but whatever. Taron Johnson has been less than ideal going into this year. I like his physicality. I like what he brings from an effort and a hard-nosed football standpoint. I don't feel tremendously confident in him in coverage, especially in man, and the times when he has to go and technique for technique and athlete for athlete. He gets beat from time to time. It's not the worst thing in the world when you talk about his play so far this year. Last night, I know it showed up in big moments, but he had a bad game. But that's also not unique to him. The Bills defense as a whole had a bad game. Something that's interesting to think about going forward with the play of Cam Lewis. I'm not ready to sit and say Cam Lewis needs to be a starter. I like what he brought last night. I'd like to see him in coverage a bit more. We're not getting the access to practice and everything this year, so I don't know. Maybe he's looked terrible in coverage in practice. But there were reports that Cam Lewis got more work at nickel throughout the year than he has on the outside. Greg and Aaron talked about it last night on the Cover One post game. That's something interesting to think about going forward. If Cam Lewis has been getting work at nickel, maybe we see some reps with Cam Lewis at nickel going forward. Not to take over for Taron Johnson. I don't think that's a thing, but maybe see some more rotation, maybe spell him a little bit. Same thing on the outside with Norman and Levi Wallace. When Levi comes back, which is hopefully soon, see more rotation, see fresher bodies in the secondary as a whole, and see what you can be able to do with guys. As Nicholas pointed out here, Taron in coverage is not ideal. Yeah, that's been a theme somewhat all year, and especially last night's game. He got beaten in less than ideal times. I also don't think he's been the strongest of cover guys in his career. I don't think he's a bad nickel corner. I think there's ones that are better than him, but he's had injury concerns, which doesn't translate to his play on the field, but it kind of does because of how at times reckless he plays. He plays very aggressive. He sometimes plays out of himself, and that leads to him getting hurt, but he sticks his nose in there. He's strong in run support. He's better coming forward than he is in coverage. Last night showed that, and just less than ideal with his play so far, and especially last night. I do want to say some things when it comes to the bad. This was a terrible game. This was a terrible loss. And I think what compounds it even more is we don't like Tennessee. We don't like their fans. We don't like a lot about Tennessee and the Titans. And even though this was a Tuesday night and it wasn't originally scheduled to be a primetime game, this was a primetime game in front of a national audience. And the Bills got housed very, very badly. They were lackadaisical. They didn't have focus. They were bad in their pre-snap discipline. They were bad in their post-snap execution. It didn't look like the preparation was there. They didn't look particularly well coached or schemed, something that is very uncharacteristic for a Sean McDermott defense and a Sean McDermott team. They didn't hit what they were supposed to hit on. And it was a terrible loss, and it was in front of a national audience against a team and a fan base that Bills fans don't like. It was bad. It was all bad. But it's one loss. The Bills are 4-1 after 5 games. And it could be much worse. It could be much, much worse. At the end of the day, it's one game. If this game was enough to put you down to the doom level, and I get why you can go to the doom level. For as much as I am objective and an analyst and a student of the game, I'm still a Bills fan. I love the Bills. I cover the Bills objectively, but I cover them because I love them. When they lose, it ruins me. When they win, I'm on cloud 9. But being a Bills fan, that paranoia and that worry of being a Bills fan because of what you've suffered through probably your entire life is always going to be there. So I think it's very easy to see this loss and compound everything and put it together and see and be like, oh, I shouldn't have got my hopes up. Oh, the sky is falling. Everything's on fire. See, I knew it. Here we go again. There have been so many Bills moments throughout the years of here we go again. Oh, I thought the Bills were going to be good. Nope. Here we go again. I can't believe I let myself get fooled. All of those types of things. Don't let last night get you down like that. I think the Bills will course correct. Again, this is still a weird year. We had a COVID offseason. We had no preseason. The team is still figuring out who they are and how to gel and how to get together and how to be the team that they need to be. If last night was enough to push you down the mountain and put you back into DEFCON 5, the apocalypse is coming scenario, this isn't for you then. Pump the brakes a little bit on that. That was for Aaron Quinn. I know you're watching. Pump the brakes. Hashtag royalties for Aaron. That's his phrase. He loves it. He coined it. The sky isn't falling with this team. This is a tough stretch. It started a tough stretch, and it's not good that the Bills started out bad in this stretch. We've got Tennessee. We've got the Chiefs. Then we've got the Jets. Then the Pats and the Seahawks and the Cardinals. And the Niners are still coming up on the schedule. And I know they've looked vulnerable, but they're still a good football team. This is a tough stretch, and it's not good to start out so poorly on a tough stretch. And it's not particularly pleasing to lose to a team that your fans don't like and lose on national television in such a heartbreaking fashion, in such an ugly and disappointing fashion. But it's not the end of the world. There is a ton of football left. There is a ton of football left. We've only played 5 games so far this year. We are just in the middle of October. There's a lot of football left to figure out who this Bills team is going to be and what they're going to do. And also within that, with the bad, We've seen a bit of schemability from the Bills' opponents the last several weeks. We have seen teams attack them in a certain way on defense, attack the middle of the field, attack the intermediate, especially with the passing game. Well, in the passing game, the intermediate passing game, not really having an intermediate running game. We've seen the offense of other teams attack the Bills' defense like that. We've seen now what Tennessee has done in somewhat providing a blueprint and how to stifle the Bills' offense a little bit, which was drop 7, drop 8, do not get beat over the top, and make everything stay in front of you, make Josh Allen beat you in a very meticulous fashion, take 7 and 8 instead of going for the big play and drive it down the field. I think it was a little easier for Tennessee to do that last night because John Brown not being there had a massive effect. The lack of vertical presence that John Brown provides is something that I hope, after seeing how the Bills looked last night, is something that no one will ever underestimate. John Brown's mere presence is a factor on this offense, even if he's not catching passes. The speed that he has, even just winning on mesh routes and out routes, he affects so much because of that vertical threat. He can set up corners like he's going deep and kick it outside or stop or go over the middle or just win deep with his speed. So it was easier for Tennessee to play that style of defense last night and not get beat over the top with John Brown not being there. But nonetheless, they may have provided somewhat of a blueprint in how to stifle the Bills' offense. That being said, it is much, much better to have that blueprint earlier in the year and to allow the Bills to be able to course correct for that going forward. Juxtapose that with what happened to the Baltimore Ravens last year when the Buffalo Bills provided the blueprint on how to stifle the Ravens' offense. The Titans then carried that into the playoffs and shut the Ravens down in the divisional round. And what happened? The Ravens were one and done. I would much rather have teams figure us out early in the year and then hope and trust in the coaching staff and the players to course correct and adjust from that, learn from that, and move forward. Again, there is a lot of football. What we saw last night was very bad. It was very much not good. #analysis. But it's not the end of the world. The sky is not falling. This team has quality. This team has depth. You got to believe in this team at some point. This is the team. I know we wanted last night to be a certain way, and we were worried about the injuries, and it could have gone a lot better, and it could have gone in a direction that solidified our hopes and our faith that we put in this Bills team this year. But all is not lost. We got to see what happens next week. And what we're going to see next week is the Bills face the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's something that's very, very scary. This game for me against the Kansas City Chiefs, as I turn my notebook, I'm a notebook guy. I don't really write on my phone and do notes and stuff like that. I write with paper and pad. This game against the Chiefs was one that I think pretty much every Bills fan had marked. The defending, reigning Super Bowl champs, one of the favorites for the Super Bowl this year, easily one of the favorites for the AFC, a very good football team in every facet of the game, good coaching, all of these things. This game was already, before the season started, very important because of everything I just said, but also because it was part of a very tough stretch for the Bills, facing the Titans, then facing the Chiefs. And then I know we have the Jets, but you've got the Pats mixed in there. You've got the Seahawks mixed in there. It's a tough stretch. It's a prove-it stretch for the Buffalo Bills. I had this game against Kansas City marked as a loss before the season started. And then the Chiefs lost against the Raiders, and I was like, it's going to be even tougher to beat the Chiefs because I think they're the type of team that is not going to be happy that they lost. They're going to course correct, and they're going to come out hard against the Bills. But now you almost have that same situation for the Bills. They got housed on national television in a terrible way. And they have a home game against the defending Super Bowl champs. I know there's no crowd, but it's still a home game. The Buffalo Bills have to nut up against the Chiefs this week. The Buffalo Bills have to show something against the Chiefs. I still think the Bills are going to lose this game. The Chiefs are a very good football team. And I know their defense hasn't looked good, but they have talent on that side of the ball. But more important than the win or the loss. I mean, if the Bills get the win, that's fantastic. But how the Bills play in this game. At first, it was just how they play. Now it's how they play and how do they respond to what they did last week against the Titans. Because what happened against the Titans in so many forms and fashions. I know Milano was out. I know Trey was out. And that's a big factor in the game against Tennessee. Those are big, big losses. Matt Milano is the second best player on our defense, maybe third or fourth if you want to say Hyde and Poyer, but the position that he plays for the Bills and the importance of it, he's so strategically important for the Bills defense, and so is Trey. But if you're getting eaten up by the likes of, no disrespect, Jonnu Smith and Anthony Ferkser and Khalif Raymond, if those guys are problems, what is Tyreek Hill going to do? What is Mecole Hardman going to do? What is Travis Kelce going to do? The Buffalo Bills defense prior to this year is a schematically and strategically sound defense, but they're not particularly fast. They're not overly talented. They're well coached. They're well schemed. The Chiefs offense is well coached. They are well schemed, and they have oodles of talent. They can all run like 1.5 40-yard dashes. They are blisteringly fast. They have an entire offense of 99 Madden speed guys. They're a track team that can also play football really well. It's a less than ideal matchup for the Buffalo Bills defense, even if Trey is back, which we need him back. Trey is a good corner, very good corner. His technique is very sound, but he's not overly athletic. He's not overly fast, and he's been susceptible to the deep ball at times. It's going to be a very challenging game for the Bills against the Chiefs, which we all knew. And as Richie Rich said, that's an awesome name, I had the Chiefs as the only game I didn't care to lose until the Titans game. Now, I'm assuming you mean now. Now, I just hope we play well, win or loss. And that's exactly what it is. Hoping now that we play well, even if we lose. I want to see how the Bills respond. It's tremendously important for the morale of this team for this season. They got punched in the mouth hard on national television. Also against a team they don't like. Jerry Hughes does not like Taylor Lewan. The Bills do not like Tennessee. Tennessee does not like the Bills. And we went into their house and they beat the crap out of us and kicked us out in front of the world. It was a bad loss. And now you're going up against the defending, reigning Super Bowl champions. It's easy to kind of fall into a shell and get smacked and get owned. And how the Bills respond and how the Bills show up in this game, it was already very important. It was already very important for what they were going to do. But now it's even more so. There's even more pressure and emphasis on this game to see what the Bills do. Because if the Bills are going to hang with the Chiefs, especially defensively, if the Bills defense is going to hang with the Chiefs offense, that means they're executing from a technique and a scheme and a play calling standpoint. Because if you're just going athlete for athlete, we're not running with the Chiefs. And that doesn't mean you're going to lose, and that's not a bad thing. But if the Bills are going to hang with the Chiefs and give the Chiefs problems, it's going to be with scheme. It's going to be with tactics. It's going to be with strategy, #strategery. The Bills are going to need to have that going into that game. And if you are a Bills fan, this game was already marked on your calendar. But even more so now, we need to see what the Buffalo Bills are going to do against the Chiefs. Also within that, got to see if Milano comes back and what he looks like, what Trey looks like if he comes back. Someone that I want to talk about now in relation to the Chiefs, because he's going to play an important role. Someone who has had eyes on him all year, Tremaine Edmonds. He's played very much less than ideal so far this year. I don't think it's as bad as we're making it out to be. Yes, he's not at the level that we'd like him to be, but he's still very young. He's still 22. I think the problem is, again, I mentioned it on last week's episode. We've heard all the hype with Tremaine, how young he is, the frame that he has, the size that he has, the potential that he has, the ceiling that he has, all these things for Tremaine Edmonds, and he hasn't delivered on that so far. The expectations are very high for him. The bar is very high for him. Add in the fact of, oh man, Sean McDermott and his connection to Luke Kuechly. Oh my God, Tremaine Edmonds is going to be the next Luke Kuechly. Add in the success that we've seen for young linebackers in the league. For me, something that really killed me watching the Monday Night Football game, seeing Kenneth Murray for the Chargers play really well on an injured, banged up Chargers defense. Their studs and their stars were down and out. The Saints offense is a good offense. And Kenneth Murray showed up and kind of carried the flag for them a little bit, played well in pass coverage, was making good tackles, making impact plays. You're seeing this first-round rookie for the Chargers make plays, and then the next night, our good young linebacker, not so much. I think the injury to Tremaine is still hampering him and hindering him a bit. Leslie Frazier mentioned, I think he's playing through a lot of pain. I don't think that's a secret. It's limited his physicality. It's limited his mobility. He did have a very, very, very good pass breakup on a third down, and he's flashed a bit. He's gotten better. I think as he gets healthier, the performances we see from him will be better. But he hasn't played up to snuff right now. I want to see what he does against the Chiefs, because this Bills defense all year, it's part of this onto the Chiefs segment, but it's also part of the bad. The Bills have been eaten alive in the intermediate part of the field in the passing game. So we take the Tennessee game. Ryan Tannehill attempted only 3 passes over 15 yards in his 28 attempts. Derek Carr, 4 passes attempted over 15 yards in 44 attempts. Jared Goff, 5 attempts over 15 yards in 32 attempts. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 5 attempts over 15 yards in 47 attempts. The Bills are getting eaten alive from 0 to 15 yards, especially in the middle of the field. If you go to Next Gen Stats, look at the passing charts and the passing results of the quarterbacks that the Bills have faced, not including the Jets game. There are just dot after dot in the 0 to 15. Tons of green completion markers. It looks like chicken pox if you're looking at the screen. There is a lot. Tremaine Edmonds controls that middle, or in theory, he should. And you've got a Chiefs team that loves drag routes, that loves mesh concepts over the middle. They love, faking to the left, faking to the right, tight end screen in the middle of the field. They love throwing Tyreek Hill over the middle. They love getting Kelsey on matchups in the middle of the field. What the Chiefs do very well on offense, granted, they do a lot of things very well, but what they do very well is a bad matchup for this Bills defense. Tremaine Edmonds, we need him to step up against the Chiefs. I'm very intrigued to see what his play looks like against the Chiefs. Michael's statement here, I feel like Edmonds could thrive more if we asked him to do a bit less. That's a fair point. We've put a lot on his plate as a young player. Again, I mentioned it and we talk about it. He's still only 22. He's young, and we've kind of thrust him into the leadership role on the defense and thrust him into that play calling, adjustment on the field type of guy. I know Micah Hyde does a lot and Poyer does a lot, but we've thrown him into a high traffic position. We've asked a lot from him. And especially in today's NFL, it's hard to be a linebacker. It's hard to be a defender, period, in that back seven. It's hard to cover. You can't touch receivers. You can't hit them. You can't look at them the wrong way. You can't swear at them or scowl at them. You'll get flagged. It's hard to play defense. It's hard to cover. And especially with the quality and caliber of quarterbacks that there are in the NFL, it's tough to do that. And for a young middle linebacker, a young signal caller, captain of a defense type player, we have asked a lot of him. But I don't know if you can ask him to do a bit less. The linebackers in Sean McDermott's scheme are extremely important. That's why previous teams that he's been on have been led by those linebackers. It's a very demanding position. Look at Carolina. I mean, Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly, Shaq Thompson, they were the heart and soul. They were the core. Even going back to the days in Philly and those teams he coached, Jeremiah Trotter, you need a strong leadership player at that middle linebacker spot and somebody who can execute. And I think Tremaine still has that potential. And as Justin mentioned here, it's Edmonds' 3rd year. It's time to step up. I know it's his 3rd year, but he's still young and green in terms of football. That doesn't give him a pass. And that doesn't mean like he'll be fine, trust the process, yada, yada, every proverbial cliche statement there. But he's still got a lot of football left in the tank. He's somebody that, again, I know because of his draft level, where we took him, we traded back up to get him because of the potential and the prospect rating and all the things you see with him. It's easy to expect a lot and think that, oh my God, this guy's going to be amazing. And by 25, oh, he's going to be even better. And by 30, he could have another mega deal. Oh my God, it's easy to set that bar and get ahead of yourself a little bit. I do think he has to be better, but he's still young, and the injuries, especially the one that he suffered this year, they've hampered him a bit. He hasn't been the same player since he went down with that shoulder injury. This game against the Chiefs is going to be a very, very, very big test for Tremaine Edmonds and for the Bills defense as a whole. How do we hang with the champs? How do we come out and combat everything that has killed us so far this year? How does Josh Norman look? I want to touch on Josh Norman briefly. He got beat multiple times by A.J. Brown. I don't think it was as bad as it seems. I know the A.J. Brown touchdown is going to get replayed. I know the Derrick Henry stiff arm truck is going to get replayed over and over, and it should because it was awesome. Sorry. Josh Norman made some good plays last night as well. He's going to struggle with more athletic receivers. He's going to struggle against guys with speed and guys with size. It's going to be tough against Seattle with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. It's going to be tough against the Chiefs with Mecole Hardman and Tyreek Hill. He is going to struggle against speed and athleticism, much like he did against A.J. Brown last night. But he's got good enough technique and fundamentals, and his fit is good enough in this defense that he can make himself not be a liability. And as soon as Levi comes back, which again is hopefully soon, get more of a rotation there for Josh Norman. He did not have the best of games last night against Tennessee, but much like the Bills team as a whole, I do not think all is lost for Josh Norman. His technique and ability to succeed in this style of defense is still present, but he is not going to be a liability, but he will struggle against more athletic or more physically impressive receivers and receiving threats. Jerry Hughes, I mentioned it a brief bit earlier in the episode. Not a great game last night. Blew contain on a couple plays, but as Eric Turner of Cover One broke down in several videos, he had some moves inside where it looked like the defensive tackle should have looped back around to cover his outside, but did not. Oh, I love this comment. I'm going to highlight this. Cover One analysis and interaction is exactly what I need as a Bills fan. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Richie Rich. I appreciate you. You're a good person. That's a good comment. I love these type of things, That's good stuff. I love the engagement. So fun. I wish it was coming after a Bills win instead of a Bills loss. But Jerry Hughes had some moves inside where potentially the contain was blown by him, but he could have been looking for coverage from one of his defensive line mates. There are some things there and some scheme things there that we potentially don't know that might give him a bit of a pass, but he did not have a good game last night. But I saw some thoughts on the old social media and the internet of let's get rid of Jerry now, trade him, cut him, release him, any of that stuff. No, he has been good for the Bills this year. I know he doesn't have a sack, but again, he leads the team in pressures 4 more than the man in second. He hasn't gotten home, but he's caused havoc. He's a leader. He's been good in the run game. He had multiple good stops against the run last night. He's done well. It's just upsetting to see him have a bad game on national television. But again, I think that was for the whole team. Bad coach game, bad game in terms of focus and effort and mentality and intensity. Just not good things all around. Exactly. As Justin said here, it's one bad game. Let's not blow it out of proportion. I know it sucks. It's not good at all. But it could be a lot worse. The Bills are still sitting here at 4-1. And now it's going to be even more important to see what they do against the Kansas City Chiefs and then what they do against the Jets and the Pats and the Seahawks and the Cards and eventually the Steelers and all these games that they have down the road. I still don't think we have seen who the Buffalo Bills are in terms of what they'll be at the end of the season. They're not even close to a finished product. They're still adjusting. They're still finding themselves. Hopefully John Brown comes back. Hopefully Matt Milano comes back. Hopefully Trey White comes back. They're very key. But for as bad as this loss was, and it was bad, not a lot of positives. We mentioned it in the beginning, the good, you guys. There wasn't a lot of it. But for as bad as this loss was, it was one bad game. It's one loss. Study the film, course correct, move on to Kansas City. We might be sitting here next week on next week's episode, potentially talking about another bad loss. The Chiefs are a good football team, and I think not only are they a good football team, you can play a good football team, but match up well with them. The Bills defense, I don't think matches up well with the Kansas City offense. Hopefully the Bills offense can put up a gajillion points and keep up, but it's going to be tough to stop Kansas City. It's going to be tough to limit what they do. Mahomes is awesome. They're banged up on the offensive line, but Mahomes is great. Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't even really taken off. He's a good back, and he's a good fit in their offense. We mentioned Hill and Hardman and Kelsey. It looks like there's going to be no Sammy Watkins, but they still got threats, and they're a well-coached team. Eric Bieniemy, their offensive coordinator, is likely next man up for an NFL head coaching job in terms of the coordinators. Andy Reid is Andy Reid, successful NFL coach. They're a good squad. They're a good team, and it's a tough matchup for the Bills. So if we're sitting here next week and the Bills got housed again, it's a less than ideal situation, but there's still a lot of football left, a lot of time for the Bills to figure out who they are, cover up their holes. They got to get healthy. They got to get better in certain areas. I think it's possible. That's going to be the end of this week's episode of Disguised Coverage. Toodles, you guys, as it says here on the live stream. If you're listening on the podcasting part or listening to the audio only, I put the phrase toodles, you guys, up on the screen because Toodles is a fun way to say goodbye, and you guys always makes me laugh when I add it to everything. Ooh, I want to pull, before I do that, good comment by Richie Rich. I believe our QB has the it factor to rise up after losses like this. I don't know about the whole team, but I believe in Josh. Something that was very cool last night, if you saw it on the broadcast, Bills were down, game was over, they were going to lose. Allen went up and dapped up every single member of the Bills defense on the bench and gave them some words of encouragement. Maybe it's corny and maybe the players don't think it meant anything or anything like that. We can be negative, but I thought that was pretty baller and pretty awesome that Allen was like, hey, shake it off. And whatever he said was positive. It was cool to see him lead like that. We got to see the team step up. Kansas City is going to be a big test. It's time to nut up against Kansas City. The Bills don't necessarily have to get the win against the Chiefs. If they did, awesome. But we got to see, even if it's a loss, I know there's no moral victories in sports. You either get a loss or a win or a tie for the Eagles and the Bengals. But they got to look good in that loss. They can't get housed again. If they do, we got another type of conversation we're going to have next week, depending on what happens. But we got a lot of guys that got to step up, got to course correct from this horrible game against Tennessee, see what the Bills do. But all is not lost. Stay the course. Trust the process. Oh, I appreciate you, Michael. The Toodles breakdown deserved a deeper dive. I'll add that to next week's notes, and I'll really break down the Toodles, you guys, and the phrasing and where it comes from and its origin and what it means to me. Hopefully we're talking next week after a Bills win. If not, we're going to break it down further, as we always do here on Disguised Coverage. Thank you very much for riding with me on this episode. Please, again, follow me on the old Twitter, pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Subscribe to Disguised Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. Follow Cover One. Follow the whole team. And again, thank you very much for riding with me on this episode. I am nothing without everybody listening and engaging and interacting. I appreciate all the support. Back up off the ledge. It's not the end of the world. The Bills are going to be okay. Pump the brakes. That was for you, Aaron. Thank you for riding with me. I'll see you next week.